It's Thursday, January 14th, 2016. This is the Hermetic Hour. I'm your host, Poke Runyon. And tonight, we present a commentary and a reading of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a poem from medieval Persia by the mystic and astronomer Omar Khayyam, translated by Edward Fitzgerald and published in 1859. Now, the Rubaiyat is quintessentially romantic in style and content. It is said to reflect the ancient cyrenaic hedonistic philosophy of Aristippus and extols a libertine lifestyle in preference to piety. When I was a teenager, I needed to break away from Christian fundamentalism, so I adopted the Rubaiyat as my alternative to the Bible. I memorized the entire poem so that I could quote seductive passages to Baptist virgins while drinking beer on the beach at sunset. Those were the days. Or, as Omar would put it, alas, that spring should vanish the rose, that youth's sweet-scented manuscript should close, the nightingale that in the branches sang, whence and whither flown again, who knows? And so, if you yearn to know what Omar's moving finger writ, then stay with us, and we will inoculate you against excessive piety. Oh, we're going to have fun tonight. Now, I've had a long, and very satisfying relationship with the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Actually, I think my mother felt sorry for me. She dragged me to this fundamentalist church when I was a kid, and I think she felt sorry for me because she gave me my first copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, and she even gave me as a present a wonderful long-playing recording of it by, I believe, Ralph Bellamy. I think he did a long-playing version of it, and I did. I needed it to break loose from all of this fundamentalist goody stuff and all. And I think it would be a wonderful corrective for those of you out there who are trying to escape from fundamentalist upbringings, and I've certainly had several friends that fall into that category. This is a great way to do it. I mean, to get all of that stuff and yet pour into you to sort of give a counterflow to it. Also, too, I think personally, and I think once you read the Rubaiyat, Fitzgerald's translation especially, once you read it and you study it, you're going to realize that Crowley was very much influenced by it. And those of you who are still very Thelemic, you're going to find that Fitzgerald was obviously an influence, or Fitzgerald version of Khayyam this was obviously an influence on Crowley. Although Crowley his only comment on it in his confessions was that it was a fad at the time. Well, it was a fad that obviously he was a fan of, and you can see that. And as we progress in it, you will see. Also, but something I want to correct on when I published the abstract on this, I said that this was a Sufi poem. No, I'm going to correct that. It wasn't. Omar Khayyam should not be referred to as a Sufi. Actually, some of the pious individuals he was criticizing in his poetry and satiring were actually Sufis. And he says so in one line that we'll quote tonight. He even mentions the Sufis. Omar, I don't think, although my philosophy professor at the University of Florida, Dr. Davidson, he apparently thought that Omar was influenced by the Greek philosopher Aristippus, who was the father of what is called cyrenaic hedonism and the pursuit of pleasure and as a philosophy of life. That's possible that Omar read Aristippus, because the Persians back in the Middle Ages, and Omar was contemporary with King Richard and Robin Hood over on our side of the pond, over there in Persia, but Omar was lived a life of exciting adventure, and he really was quite a character. And sure enough, there was a movie made about him, obviously. Cordell Wilde played Omar, and Michael Rennie was Osanos, and even Saba, the old man of the mountain. By the way, just a little bit of that history of Omar. Omar, when he was in school, he had two very close friends. One of them became the Grand Vizier, and the other one became the old man of the mountain, and the Hassan ibn Saba, the Grand Master of the Assassins, who founded the Ismaili sect. And these three students, when they were in school, they made a pledge that they would share that whichever one of them achieved fortune would share it with the others. Well, sure enough, one of them became the Grand Vizier, and he made Omar the poet laureate and the court, and gave him an appointment, probably as court astrologer, but Omar was primarily an astronomer. He was a scientist. Wrote a textbook on algebra. Omar was he was a Renaissance man over in Persia a couple hundred years before the Renaissance got started. But Omar's was what we would call religiously, philosophically, what we would call an agnostic. He was very, very cynical of the whole idea of revelation and the supernatural, the whole idea of God and intervening in human affairs, whatever. He was very, very, very cynical of that, and his poem, especially the Rubaiyat, indicates that. And I want to point out that even though he's highly respected and his tomb is still visited today, and the Sufis now they claim him. Well, at least some Sufi orders claim him as a genuine Sufi, but he really was not a Sufi. He in fact, during his heyday, the Sufis were against him, and so were the imams and the ayatollahs. They didn't like him either, because his poetry was blasphemous. And well, as you'll see tonight, you could imagine would be. And he was extolling a life of pleasure, and whatever, if it feels good, do it. He was just as much of a Thelemite as Crowley was, and like I say, I really do think that the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam had an influence on Crowley, the Fitzgerald's version of it. Because remember now, it was first published 1859. What we're going to read tonight, and Crowley was, he was getting started, in his career in the 1870s, 1880s. And now, with me, I just loved this poem, and as I said, I needed. Had so much of this fundamental Christianity rammed down my throat that I needed it, and I memorized it, and like I said, the old verse from Rubaiyat that most of us know, a loaf of, a jug of wine, a loaf of bread, and thou, beside me in the wilderness, wilderness is paradise now, we all know that one. And so obviously I was using the Rubaiyat to beguile the Baptist virgins with my poetic, romantic, anyway, and also too, I have another story that I was sharing with Andrea tonight. When I was up in Smoke Bomb Hill Special Forces back when, in my 20s, and I was a corporal, and we had a duty. Somebody had to be what we call CQ, charge of quarters. And what you had to be if you were the CQ is you had to go down to the orderly room, and the orderly room was in front of about 10 barracks in a line. You know, you have a whole battalion, bunch of barracks, and then they have this orderly room. And so the CQ would stay there all night. And he was the officer on duty, but he was actually not. Quite often, he wasn't an officer. They'd have an OD. They'd have a duty officer, but he'd be for the whole, usually for the whole battalion, sometimes for the company. But the CQ would usually be the company CQ for the company, and he would stay there with a pot of coffee all night in the orderly room to take calls. And, you know, to be there in case anybody checked in. And his duty was to wake up the troops. And he didn't blow the bugle, but he did. What the CQ did, well, in some outfits they would have him. He'd put a bugle call record on the loudspeaker, but in special forces, he'd just get on the loudspeaker, and he'd usually they'd say something obscene like, "All right, you guys, it's 4:00 in the morning," yeah, and then they make an obscene remark about. Oh, I'm like, those of you who have been in the service, you know what the remark is. It involves something, and then you put your socks on, something that rhymes with socks, and that's usually the way the CQ would wake the guys up in the morning. Well, I thought I got to do something different. So when it came time for me to put on the loudspeaker, I remember my Omar, and I said, I got the loudspeaker tuned up real loud, and I said, "Awake, for morning in the boil of night has flung the stone that puts the stars to flight. And lo, the hunter of the east has caught the Sultan's turret in a noose of light." Well, I thought they'd like it, but they didn't. They were roaring, and they were roaring as if they were in pain, and they were saying, "No, no more, no, shut up, no." So I guess they didn't like it. But anyway, so that was one use of Omar, and so we're going to go into it right now. And by the way, I want to say this: those of you familiar with Omar, I have edited out a little section of the poem, and the reason is that this little section is a metaphor where Khayyam is in a potter's shop. There's a bunch of pots in the shop, and the potter's making pots, and the pots are all having a conversation. It's all very metaphoric, and it's nice and all of that, but it kind of it for a reading it gets a little hard to follow. So I use that to kind of shorten things up a little bit, but I encourage you, as you said, those of you who are going to get a hold of Rubaiyat and read it after this introduction to it, and I hope you will, especially you Thelemites, because I want you're going to immediately see that Crowley was influenced by this. And so let's start off. Awake, for morning in the bowl of night has flung the stone that puts the stars to flight. And lo, the hunter of the east has caught the Sultan's turret in a noose of light. Dreaming when dawn's left hand was in the sky, I heard a voice within the tavern cry, "Awake, my little ones, and fill the cup, before life's liquor in its cup be dry." And as the cock crew, those who stood before the tavern shouted, "Open then the door, you know how little while we have to stay, and once departed may return no more." Now the new year, reviving old desires, the thoughtful soul to solitude retires, where the white hand of Moses on the bough puts out, and Jesus from the ground suspires. Yet indeed is gone with all its rose, and Yamshid's 7-ring cup where no one knows, but still the vine her ancient ruby yields, and still a garden by the water blows. And David's lips are locked, but in divine, high-piping Palevi with wine, 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 red wine, the nightingale cries to the rose, that yellow cheek of hers in Caradine. Come, fill the cup, and in the fire of spring, the winter garment of repentance fling. The bird of time has but little way to fly, and lo, the bird is on the wing. And look, 1,000 blossoms with the day woke, and 1,000 scattered into clay. And this first summer month shall bring the rose, and it shall take Yamshid and Kaikobad away. But come with old Khayyam and leave the lot of Kaikobad and Kaikoshu forgot. Let Rustum lay about him as he will, or Hatem Tai cry supper, heed them not. With me along some strip of herbage strewn that just divides the desert from the sun, where name of slave and sultan scarce is known, and pity Sultan Mahmud on his throne. Here with a loaf of bread beneath the bough, a flask of wine, a book of verse, and thou beside me, singing in the wilderness. Wilderness is paradise now. How sweet is mortal sovereignty, think some. Others, how blessed the paradise to come. Take the cash in hand and wave the rest, nor heed the music of a distant drum. Look to the rose that blows about us. Lo, laughing, she says, into the world I blow, and once the silken tassel of my purse tear, and its treasure on the garden throw. The worldly hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes, or it prospers, and anon, like snow upon the desert's dusty face, lighting a little hour or two, is gone. And those who husbanded the golden grain, and those who flung it to the winds like rain, alike no such orate earth are turned, as buried once, men dug up again. Think, in this battered caravanserai, whose doorways are altered at night and day, how sultan after sultan with his pomp abode his hour or two, and went his way. They say the lion and the lizard keep the courts where Yamshid gloried and drank deep, and Bahram, that great hunter, the wild ass stamps o'er his head, and he lies fast asleep. I sometimes think that never blows so red the rose as where some buried Caesar bled, that every hyacinth the garden wears dropped in its lap from someone's lovely head. And this delightful herb, whose tender green fletches the river lip upon which we lean, lean upon it lightly, for who knows from what once lovely lip it springs unseen. My beloved, fill the cup that clears today of past regrets and future fears. Tomorrow? Why, tomorrow I may be myself, with yesterday's 7,000 years. Lo, some we loved, the loveliest and the best, that time and fate, of all their vintage pressed, have drunk their cup a round or two before, and one by one crept silently to rest. And we, that now make merry in the room they left, in summer dresses and new bloom, ourselves, must we beneath the couch of earth descend, ourselves to make a couch for whom? Make the most of what we yet may spend, before we too into the dust descend, dust into dust, and under dust to lie. Sans wine, sans song, sans singer, and sans end. Alike for those who for today prepare, and those after a tomorrow stare. A muezzin from the tower of darkness cries, "Fools, your reward is neither here nor there." Why, all the saints and sages who discussed of the two worlds so learnedly are thrust, like foolish prophets forth, their words to scorn are scattered, and their mouths are stopped with dust. Oh, come with old Khayyam and leave the wise to talk. One thing is certain, that life flies. One thing is certain, and the rest is lies. The flower that once has blown forever dies. I myself, when young, did eagerly frequent doctor and saint, and heard great argument about it and about. But evermore came out by the same door as in I went. And with them the seed of wisdom did I sow, and with mine own hand wrought to make it grow. And this was all the harvest that I reaped. I came like water, and like wind I go. Into this universe, and why, not knowing, not whence, like water, willy-nilly flowing, and out of it, as wind, along the waste, I know not whither, dilly blowing, willy-nilly blowing. What, without asking, hither hurried whence, and without asking whither hurried hence? Another cup to drown the memory of that impertinence. Up from earth's center through the seventh gate I rose, and on the throne of Saturn sat, and many knots unraveled by the road, but not the knot of human death and fate. There was a door to which I found no key. There was a veil past which I could not see. Some little talk a while of me and thee there seemed, and then no more of thee and me. Then to the rolling heaven itself I cried, asking, what lamp hath destiny to guide her little children stumbling in the dark? And the blind understanding heaven replied. Then to this earthen bowl did I adjourn, my lip the secret well of life to learn. And lip to lip it murmured, while you live, drink, for once dead you shall not return. I think the vessel that with fugitive articulation answered, once did live and merry make, and the cold lip I kissed, how many kisses I did give and take. For in the marketplace, one dusk of day, I watched the potter thumping his wet clay, and with its all obliterated tongue it murmured, gently, brother, gently pray. Ah, fill the cup, what boots it to repeat, how time is slipping underneath our feet. Unborn tomorrow and dead yesterday, why fret about if today is sweet? One moment in annihilation's waste, one moment of the well of life to taste. The stars are setting, and the caravan starts for the dawn of nothing. Oh, make haste. How long in infinite pursuit of this and that endeavor and dispute? Better be merry with the fruitful grape than sadden after none but bitter fruit. You know, my friends, how long since in my house, for a new marriage, I did make carouse, divorced old barren reason from my bed, and took the daughter of the vine to spouse. For is and is not, though with rule and line, and up and down, without I could define, and yet in all I only cared to know, I was never deep in anything but wine. And lately by the tavern door agape came stealing through the dusk an angel shape, bearing a vessel on his shoulder, and he bid me taste of it, and 'twas the grape. The grape that can with logic absolute the 72 jarring sects confute. The subtle alchemist that in a trice life's leaden metal into gold transmute. The mighty Mahmud, the victorious Lord, that all the misbelieving and black horde of fears and sorrows that infest the soul scatters and slays with his enchanted sword. But leave the wise to wrangle, and with me to quarrel of the universe let be. And in some corner of the hubbub couched, make a game of that which makes a game of thee. For in and out, above, about, below, 'tis nothing but a magic shadow show, played in a box whose candle is the sun, round which we phantom figures come and go. And if the wine you drink, the lip you press, end in the nothing, all things end in yes. Well then, fancy, while thou art but what thou shalt be, nothing, and thou shalt not be less. While the rose blows along the river brink, with old Khayyam the ruby vintage drink. And when the angel with his darker draught draws upon thee, take that, and do not shrink. 'Tis all a checkerboard of nights and days, where destiny with men for pieces plays, hither and thither moves and mates and slays, and one by one back in the closet ways. The ball no question makes of eyes and nose, but right or left as strikes the player goes. And he that tossed you down into the field, he knows about it all. He knows. Oh, he knows. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on, or all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line. All your tears wash out a word of it. And that inverted bowl we call the sky, where under crawling coops we live and die, lift not your hands to it for help, for it rolls impotently on as you and I. With the earth's first clay they did the last man knead, and then of the last harvest sowed the seed. Yea, the first morning of creation wrote what the last dawn of reckoning shall read. I tell thee this, when starting from the goal, over the shoulders of the flaming foe of heaven, Arwen, and Mustari they flung in my predestined plot of dust and soul. The vine had struck a fiber which about it clings my being. Let the Sufi flout. Of my base metal may be filed a key that shall unlock the door he howls without. And this I know, whether the one true light kindle to love or wrath consume me quite. One glimpse of it within the tavern caught, better than in the temple lost outright. O thou who didst with pitfall and with gin beset the road I was to wander in, thou wilt not with predestination round enmesh me and impute my fall to sin. O thou who man of baser earth didst make, and who with Eden didst devise the snake, for all the sin wherewith the face of man is blackened, man's forgiveness give and take. Would the grape my fading life provide, and wash my body whence the life has died, and in the winding sheet of vine leaf wrapped, bury me in some sweet garden side, that even my buried ashes such a sneer of perfume shall swing upon the air, as not a true believer passing by, but shall be overtaken unaware. Indeed, the idols I have loved so long have done my credit in men's eyes much wrong, have drowned my honor in a shallow cup and sold my reputation for a song. Indeed, repentance ought before I swore, but was I sober when I swore? Then came spring, and rose in hand my threadbare penitence a pieces tore. And much as wine has played the infidel and robbed me of my robe of honor, well, I wonder what the vintners buy when half so precious as the stuff they sell. Alas, that spring should vanish with the rose, that you sweet-scented manuscript should close. The nightingale that in the branches sang, ah, whence and whither flown again, who knows? Ah, love, could thou and I with fate conspire, to grasp the sorry scheme of things entire? Would we not shatter it to bits and then remold it nearer to the heart's desire? Moon of my delight, who knowest no wane? The moon of heaven is rising once again. How oft hereafter rising shall she look through this same garden after me in vain? A manuscript. That's the end without the business of the plots, which I could go back and read. I don't think so. I think I'll leave you to read the allegory of the pots. And let's talk about a little bit about what the actual philosophy here is. That yes, he's cynical, but there is a recognition of God. I mean, there's no doubt in as we go through this that Omar does believe in God. He just has a more of a what you might call a Kabbalistic idea of God than the idea that God is that God in His highest essence is somebody that you can directly contact, because the more philosophical Neoplatonic idea is that God at the highest level, that we would say at the level of Kepler, at the absolutic level, that God is. He is satisfied with His creation, and He is, and He continues to emanate. And in this particular situation, the Hermetic view would be that you want to get yourself in tune with the harmony of the universe. That way, if you can tune yourself up with the harmony of the universe and with the, use Lucas's Star Wars idea, you can get yourself tuned up with the Force, and then this is as close as you're going to come to being able to be in personal contact with God. And Omar is very cynical of the revelatory idea, as we know here, and he's also there's no doubt whatsoever in my mind and in the mind of most people look up Omar, that he really is. When he's talking about wine, he's not talking this. I know there are some Sufis today, or Western Sufis, or Sufi apologists, or whatever, who will tell you that when Omar is talking about wine, he's really not talking about wine. He's talking about the ecstasy of God. And the same thing in relation when he's talking about the pleasures of women, and which he does frequently in this poem, that he's talking about God. No. Omar is talking about what Omar is talking about. Omar is telling it like it is, and he is definitely talking about enjoying life. That's definitely what this is all about. And so we should not, as I say, I don't believe, even though I know some Sufis and some Westernized Sufis or Western Sufi apologists are trying to make out that Omar was a Sufi, that this should be classified as Sufi poetry. I don't think so. And it is one of the most beautiful, frankly, one of the most beautiful poems I think ever written. I'm not sure that I can do that much justice to it, but at least I've given you an idea of the beauty of it and of the influence it's had. As I say, I know it had an influence on Crowley, and I know that it's had a lot of influence on our Western concept of Eastern exoticism, and it kind of has an Arabian Nights flavored character to it, and I think, as I said, it's very, very, very useful to break the bounds of the restrictive bounds of puritanical, especially fundamental Christianity. I think that some of the restrictions. I remember when I spent a couple of years at a college that was run by ministerial students, by Baptist ministerial students, and it was a liberal arts college, but the Baptist ministerial students ran they ran the campus. They could break into your dormitory room at any time and inspect you, and they could Fortunately, the fraternities were immune from them. We had houses off campus and we could get away from them, but the regular students had no mercy from these people, and frankly, I think the Rubaiyat was one of the things that that kind of helped me get through that. It was sort of, in a way, it was kind of the Animal House philosophy. It was like, it enabled us to maintain sanity in this crazy world of these fanatical Southern Baptists. And as I said, and it was also very, very, and the Southern Baptist girls liked it. They thought it was, obviously, because it sounds beautiful, and so it served to sort of to help out in that regard too. I'm encouraging all of you to read it. And by the way, this one particular edition that I read from tonight, there are several different. By the way, Fitzgerald did several different versions of it. He changed a little bit, mostly changing the rhyme and the sentence structure in the rhyme. He did several different versions of it, but the one that I like the best, and the one I think you should look at, is the one that has the illustrations, the pen and ink illustrations by Edward Sullivan. Try to see if you can get that. There's a little sort of a fall leather. It's not leather. It's that paper that looks like brown leather. And a nice inexpensive edition. I think they've got a lot of them. They hadn't been out for a while, but you can get them used on Amazon for about $2 a copy. I think it's brown leather. It's a little brown leatherette, kind of a little thing. And it has the Sullivan illustrations, and the Sullivan illustrations are delightful. They're very hermetic and very, very, very much in the Western tradition. They're almost like tarot cards, and this. So I would recommend, if you want to get a Rubaiyat that fits in your Hermetic library and all, then I would get this. It's published by Avenel, Avenel, Avenel Books, a division of Crown Publishers, and you can find it, as I say, on just a little fall gold stamp. Little gold filigree on the box on the cover, and a little brown book, and I would recommend that. Now, next week, I would like to have a call-in night. We haven't had a call-in night in quite a while, and I'd like to hear from you folks out there. And one of the good things about the last call-in session we had is that some people suggested that we do the spheres the way we did the paths and the tree of life, that we go through the spheres, and we took that suggestion. We got that suggestion from several people, and we did our whole series on the spheres and the Kabbalistic tree of life as a result of your suggestions. Now, naturally the Hermetic Hour is going to reflect the CHSOTA program, of course, naturally, but that doesn't mean that we don't take what other folks out there in the Hermetic magical community are interested in, and we don't look at that, because our listeners and the readers of the Seventh Ray and all of that are very important to us, what you think. So next week, we want to have you call in, and if you want to write it down now, the guest call-in number is 347-857-1830. So we'll have a little program, set up. So in case we don't get that many call-ins, we'll have something going on. But primarily, we want to hear from you, and we want to have your response. So next week's call-in night, call in and talk about whatever you want about. Keep it on the Hermetic. Keep it on the Hermetic theme. And the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam definitely is Hermetic, and especially when you see these Sullivan illustrations, they're all Hermetic, and you'll realize and you'll enjoy that. And so, until next week, and we'll be getting together with you. Until next week, give us a call and let us know what you think and your reaction, and we'll look forward to it. And meanwhile, good magic.